Morning everyone. I'm talking to you today from my home in Hart Bay, and it's raining, and I imagine that if you are busy downsizing your business or perhaps even closing your business, that rain would be a suitable symbol for how you're feeling. So I was asked to talk about the question of how you stay positive when things are bleak. And I'm afraid I have bad news, because I don't know how much time you're going to spend feeling positive at all. So what are you going to be feeling? There was a wonderful woman called Elizabeth Kubler-Ross who dealt with people who were dying. And dying, I guess, is the ultimate loss that any human being deals with in life. And she came up with stages of loss, stages of grieving. And I'm quite sure that if you are either downsizing or closing down your business completely, you are grieving. So let's have a look at those stages. The first one is shock. Now, shock almost cushions you for a while. While you are feeling shock, you're in a state of disbelief. You can't actually believe this is happening. And from that place, you move quite swiftly into denial. Denial is the stage that you go through when you check those figures again and again and again, desperately looking for, there must be something I've missed. There must be something that means that I can avoid this. You are fundamentally in denial about the fact that you might actually have to close down this business or downsize the business, shrink it. Denial, another form that denial can take is also coping incredibly well. I'm fine. This is just one of those things. I will be okay. And your staff and your family and your business partners are all looking at you thinking, my goodness, how on earth is this person coping? And that's usually a sign of denial, that at some level the emotions haven't actually really hit you yet. After denial comes a very, very dangerous emotional phase. And if you are experiencing this, please accept that it is completely normal. And that is anger, wanting to lash out. Lash out at the government, lash out at the economy, lash out at staff who haven't worked hard enough, lash out at customers who weren't sufficiently appreciative, really just needing to lash out at somebody or something. Now, the thing about anger is that it is a really toxic emotion. It fills you with horrible hormones. It is not cathartic. You don't feel better when you lash out. You usually feel worse. And usually what you've got to go and do is pick up a whole lot of pieces, because you've usually said and done things that are just problematic and that result in more problems for you. So I get asked always, how do you avoid that? I mean, if it's normal, how do I stop feeling and how do I stop lashing out? It's all very well, you say feel it, don't act it, but how do I stop acting it? And that is where those of you who studied high school biology or natural science will remember this. What you've got to do, believe it or not, is simply breathe. Your body is full of adrenaline and cortisol. You are being prepared for fight or flight, and what you need to do is breathe deeply and bring yourself down. And believe it or not, that is what oxygen does. 5 deep, slow breaths can actually dissipate that adrenaline and cortisol and allow the oxygen to reach the brain again, so your good entrepreneurial brain can kick in and you can avoid saying and doing things that you're later going to regret. So anger is a really tough stage to go through. It is normal, and your ability to master your emotions will really be tested. After anger comes bargaining. And what happens in bargaining is you think, my goodness, maybe if I don't take a salary for a couple of months, maybe if my partners don't take a salary for a couple of months, maybe if we reduce the staff salaries, maybe if we can get one customer back, maybe if we can land this big piece of business. You start to bargain with trying to avoid the inevitable. You're trying to bargain desperately to find a way out. Hardly surprisingly, once you've tried that and you have got absolutely nowhere, people very often sink into depression. And the thing about depression is that it is, once again, a completely normal human state. Yes, we do medicate people for depression that becomes stuck, that kind of depression that takes over people's lives where they can't get themselves out of bed in the mornings, and they are either eating not enough or eating too much to dull their emotions. That kind of depression becomes hugely problematic, and we often go to our GPs and say, give me something, help me lift this. But the reality is that depression is in fact a completely normal response to what you're going through, and what you have to watch in yourself is whether you get sunk in it. Once again, the question is, how do you stop yourself getting sunk in it? And there I have to refer you to Simply Biz. You guys are on an incredible program that takes you step by step through small, bite-sized chunks of things that you need to do every day. And what you need to try to do with depression is lift yourself out of it and into action. And by taking a small, constructive step every day, you can start to shift that feeling of complete disempowerment, because that's what depression is. Depression is the human response to being trapped and not knowing what to do next. So very often, if you're in a situation that makes you feel completely out of control, you will feel depressed, and you need help, possibly medicinal, but you need support and guidance to take you step by step out of that. Now, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross said that when people are going through a terrible traumatic change in their lives, they go through all of these stages and finally reach acceptance. The bad news is that it's higgledy-piggledy. It is a real roller coaster. This is not easy. This is not nice and neat and sequential. Okay, I've managed to vanquish that depression. I'm going to move into acceptance now. You could move into acceptance. You could even move into acceptance only briefly. And the sad thing is that 2 days later you find you're raging with anger again. So if I say that you can't feel positive and you're going to go through this nasty roller coaster, what's the point? Well, the point is to be aware of these emotions raging through you as it occurs. It is important to acknowledge it, to sit with it, and to take the next step nonetheless. Acknowledging the emotion rather than fighting the emotion, rather than trying to force yourself to feel positive when in actual fact you're feeling incredibly down. That is what is really, really important. I've been asked another question about that. How do you deal with your clients? Isn't it unprofessional to show your clients just how you're feeling? And I think that it could be. I think that when people start to ask you how you're feeling, to be authentic and to be honest and to be real, you probably need to admit times are tough. And the neat thing to do when that is happening, because you're not wanting to make the client any more anxious than they are about your ability to deliver, is to say, yeah, we're struggling, we're taking strain, but how about you guys? What's happening with you? Turn it away from yourself, turn it back to the client, and acknowledge that we're all in this together. Certainly in South Africa, we're going through something that I think none of us ever imagined, and it is extremely tough. So make sure you're eating, make sure you're sleeping, and breathe. If you are that way inclined, get a little bit of exercise. But people who haven't been exercising would probably struggle at this time to suddenly start up an amazing exercise program. It's more important to breathe, follow the boot camp, and take yourself step by step through taking action, which will lift you out of the misery and depression and enable you to get to the stage where you can finally look forward. When looking at this topic, the other question I asked myself is, what makes human beings feel good? So if this is what makes human beings feel rotten, what makes us feel good? What contributes to our psychological well-being? And there was a wonderful woman called Carol Riff, who I think is still alive, whereas poor Elizabeth Kubler-Ross has left us about 2 or 3 years ago, I think. Carol Riff talks about personal growth. Can you learn anything out of this situation? Can you handle this situation in such a way that it becomes a process of personal growth for you? And can you re-establish autonomy and environmental mastery? Autonomy and environmental mastery are extremely difficult under these circumstances. You feel as though the ground is opening up beneath you, as if the rug is being pulled out from under your feet, and you can't imagine what you could possibly do. What you need to do nonetheless is begin to take actions that enable you to feel that despite all of this, despite government legislation, a rotten economy, and feeling like the rug has been pulled out from under my feet, I am taking systematic steps to take control of the situation. The other thing that Carol Riff said is very important is positive relations with others. Your staff who have depended on you, your family members who depend on you, your partners where there is a state of mutual dependence. How do you maintain positive relations with those people? This is incredibly important. You're going through an emotional roller coaster, as we've just described, and what you need to remember is that so are your staff, so is your team, so is your family and your partners. They're all going through the same emotional roller coaster. Very, very tough thing to try and remain calm when they are also raging with anger or experiencing their shock and dismay or lapsing into depression. Once again, breathing is your technique and following the Simply Biz guidelines. This is a very hard time, and you are guided to do what the law requires in order to handle the situation the best way you possibly can. In South Africa, what the law requires is quite arduous, so you will be giving people the best that you can possibly give them if you follow step by step through the labor relations process that involves communicating with people and consulting with people and trying to, if you are able to afford it, pay out a fair retrenchment package. So follow the Simply Biz process. Try to keep your conscience clear, because if your conscience is not clear, you won't sleep at night. Try to keep your conscience clear. Try to stay calm, bearing in mind the roller coaster that people are going through. In particular, people struggle, and I get asked often, how do you deal with other people raging? How do you deal with their anger? Because very often other people's anger will trigger us emotionally and make us feel incredibly emotional as well. And my answer there, once again, and I'm sorry if it doesn't sound like a magic wand, but it is actually pretty miraculous, is to breathe. To breathe and remain calm. There is a wonderful poem, it comes from the Victorian era, by Alfred Lord Tennyson, called, what was it called? I think it was called Ulysses. You'll be a man, my son. If you Google Tennyson, Tennyson, you'll be a man, my son, it's very much a poem that belongs to that Victorian era, and that image of the image of manhood that was required of the poor men. Whether you're a man or whether you're a woman, there's some very important lines in that. When you can keep your head when others around you are losing theirs. And in order to maintain positive relationships with others during this period, that is what you need to do. Carol Riff also speaks about purpose in life. And purpose in life goes a little bit beyond the scope of today's talk, so I'm not going to go into purpose in life, but your purpose in life and reminding yourself of your purpose in life is also what lifts psychological well-being. And finally, self-acceptance. And that goes right back to what I was saying about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Self-acceptance is so, so important. You need to stay alive to your own emotional state and your own emotional well-being. Don't ignore it. Connect in with it. Acknowledge it. Accept it. So if you have a look at the presentation pack, which I think it's just 4 slides, and I'm sure that Simply Biz will put it on the website as well, you'll find the slides that I've been describing. In creating this video, I'm unable, unfortunately, to share the slides with you. I have included in those slides a list of questions that will help you with personal growth. But before I end off, let me just speak very briefly about these positive relationships with others. Another wonderful reference book is Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he says, seek first to understand, then to be understood. 2 things. Your staff need you to communicate. Notwithstanding those 3 communicates, they need you to listen. They need you to use your mouth in the same ratio to your ears. You have 2 ears and 1 mouth. In other words, use your ears more. Maintain the communication with staff in order to maintain relationships with them through this terribly difficult period you're going through. But listen and absorb and accept and acknowledge their emotions. Yes, I can see you angry. I'm really sorry. I've been incredibly angry at times too. I'm standing here before you trying to keep calm. I would also like to lash out. This is a tough thing for all of us. The other thing to do is to remember the survivors. If you are downsizing your business and not retrenching, try to do something for the survivors as well. I think it can be useful for the survivors who also feel incredibly helpless to look at what they can do in respect of their colleagues. Is there any kind of reaching out they can do? During this pandemic, when some people are still working from home, it might not be possible to get people together to celebrate what we built together and what we achieved together. So you might need to think of, for instance, encouraging people to send emails or WhatsApps to say goodbye and to talk about how much they valued the interaction and the work that we did together. And it's the kind of thing that you might need to also think of doing, to write a small, short, personalized message to each employee, thanking them for their contribution. So we've got to get really creative around how do we celebrate what we built together, and how do we acknowledge the loss. If money is available, retraining, sending people on courses is very valuable. Referring them to the Simply Biz website so that those who have developed skills while they worked with you can potentially develop something to take them into the future. So all that remains, this is a very short presentation, but all that remains is to wish you well and to suggest that you read up about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and read up about what Carol Riff says about psychological well-being, and dip into Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Those are all resources that will stand you in incredibly good stead. Thank you for listening, and very good luck.